Week 2 of our unit on film style, we are looking at cinematography. Cinematography is another way of saying motion picture photography. So everything that has to do with the capturing of the image and what that image looks like when it is captured. As I have mentioned before, cinematography relates to the question, how is something being filmed? Mise-en-scène, remember, I talked about as being related to the question, what is being filmed? Cinematography is related to how is something being filmed. And one of the big areas that is related to how something is filmed relates to the photographic qualities of the film image, the photographic qualities that a film image has by virtue of film being a photographic medium, of moving pictures, of motion photography. Another big aspect related to this that is part of photography is lighting characteristics. What are the characteristics of the lighting in the film image? That is another very significant aspect of cinematography. What the camera is doing while it is filming the action is another big part of cinematography. The movement of the camera, if it is in fact moving. Oftentimes the camera is not moving at all, it is a stationary camera. But lots of times the camera is moving, and so when we analyze cinematography, we can talk about how is the camera moving, what is the nature of that movement, how is that movement accomplished technically by filmmakers, and what is the effect of that movement to us as viewers, just in terms of what the film looks like, as well as potentially what the movement means in the context of the story or the themes of a film. The other main thing that cinematography deals with is what is called depth of field. How much of the image is in focus? Are there some parts of the image or some planes of the image that are out of focus or blurry? Or is the entire image from foreground all the way into the background, into infinity, in focus? That is what is known technically or referred to technically as depth of field. So any kind of images that are captured on film, whether those are still images or moving images, are going to have particular photographic qualities. And there's a few different things that go into what the photographic qualities that any given film image is going to have. One of these is the selection of the film stock on which the moving images are being recorded. This is related to the nature of just the chemical composition and the physical composition of the strips of film on which the images are captured as that film runs through the camera and as the lens lets light in to the camera in the process of allowing those images to be captured. Different kinds of film stock have different light sensitivities. Some types of film stock are more sensitive to light, meaning that you can film in conditions that have less light, because whatever light exists is going to be picked up by the film stock more easily. Some film stocks are designed to be used in indoor artificial lighting situations, and other types of film stock is designed to be used in exterior outdoor situations where you have natural light, provided of course by the sun. Artificial light and natural light from the sun each have very, very different characteristics as light, and so it takes different kinds of chemical properties in the film or adjustments to those chemical properties to best capture images in each of those forms of light. Whether or not the image is monochromatic, or what we normally call black and white, or whether it is in color, is another big aspect of cinematography that is related to the photographic qualities of the image. Film stock is either black and white or color, and each of those types of film has, again, very different characteristics in terms of their chemical makeup. Of course, nowadays, a great many films and other moving image programs are recorded and shot on digital media, which could be a form of tape, like digital videotape, or right onto a computer hard drive. And that sort of recording medium that the images are being recorded onto has its own photographic qualities. Of course, when you're talking about recording on tape or recording directly to a computer hard drive, there is no film stock involved. There is no chemical makeup of that, and that has or that causes different kinds of things to happen with the image that filmmakers, if they're using those recording means, have to take into consideration. Another part of the photographic qualities of the film image is the aspect ratio. The aspect ratio is the shape of the film frame. Traditionally, meaning in the classical Hollywood era and before that, there was more of a squarish shape to the film frame, what was called the Academy ratio. And that ratio was 1.33 to 1, meaning that one dimension of the image was 1.33 larger than the other dimension. In the 1950s, when television, which basically pre-widescreen television, of course, had the Academy ratio, movies began to be made in widescreen to differentiate movies from television for audiences and try and make movies appeal to audiences by giving them something they couldn't get on television. And so widescreen aspect ratio became the norm by about the middle of the 1960s. And now, of course, we have widescreen televisions as well with a widescreen aspect ratio. And there are a few other sorts of aspect ratios that have existed historically over the years, but these are the two main categories of aspect ratio. And so aspect ratio, or the shape of the film frame, which is determined in part by properties of the film stock and properties of the recording, is another aspect of cinematography. Different types of film can have different widths as well. You probably are familiar with the gauge 35 millimeter film. Most professional still photography used to, and those that still do actually use film for still photography, use 35 millimeter film, or film stock that is 35 millimeters wide. And that has been and still is, when films are shot actually on film, the gauge for movies as well. 16 millimeter is another common film gauge used for projecting films in, or used to be used for projecting films in classroom situations and so forth, and a lot of amateur film shot on 16 millimeter, so film that is 16 millimeters wide. The film gauge has, what the film gauge is, has an impact on what the photographed film image looks like as well, because wider film gauges typically have higher resolution images than less wide or narrower film gauges. Lighting is one of the key components of cinematography as well. Uh, Various things that have to do with lighting are very important to the filmmaking process and important to our process as viewers in understanding how films work and in interpreting films and making meaning out of films. One of the most common lighting schemes that is used in uh, still photography and also um, for our interests, motion picture photography, is called three-point lighting. Three-point lighting. This is a lighting setup that uses three separate lighting instruments or three separate lights to create a pattern of light on the subject that makes it able to be photographed and easily photographed. These 3 points in the three-point lighting scheme are the key light, the fill light, and the backlight. Those are the names that are given to the 3 positions in the three-point lighting scheme. The most important of these 3 positions, and the reason why it's given its name, is the key light. It's called the key light because it is the key light. It is the most important light and usually the brightest light in the lighting scheme. So it is the main light that is providing most of the illumination to the subject, and then the fill light and the backlight sort of fill in and do a couple of different things in connection with the key light to complete the three-point lighting scheme. And I'll speak more about that in just a moment. You may have heard before the terms high key and low key. These are terms that have been whose use have been expanded to refer to things other than film lighting, but they originate in talking about film lighting, and so high key versus low key lighting is one of the key distinctions that we can make, or things that we can notice in the lighting of the film image. High key lighting is just lighting where the key light is very bright, and in general the level of illumination is such that there are really no areas that are in shadow. There's bright light across the film image, and there aren't really any areas that are in any shadows at all. The flip side of that is low key lighting. In low key lighting, there may only be a key light, and it may not be a very bright one at that. And so low key lighting has many areas that are in shadow. There may be some areas of the film image within the film frame that are not lit at all. They may be completely dark and completely black. But the one key light that is lighting a little bit will create highlights maybe on one side of a character's face or on one particular direction that light is coming from. Part of our film clips this week is some examples of high key and low key lighting that will hopefully help you to have a better understanding of the distinction between high key lighting and low key lighting. Filmmakers use all sorts of different things to modify the light and to alter the light and shape the light to make it exactly the right quality of light that they're looking for in a particular shot. There are all kinds of filters that are used, diffusion, or things that can be put in front of the lighting instruments to make light less harsh, reflection, things that allow light to bounce off of, or that are used to bounce light from one lighting instrument onto other objects, and so forth. These and other things are used by filmmakers, by directors, and by cinematographers to try and shape the light and create exactly the right quality of light that the filmmakers are looking for in a particular shot or in a particular scene. This is just a visual graphic representation of three-point lighting, very similar to one that is in your SICOF text. And this is sort of a bird's eye view or an overhead view, so you can see, we're looking down from above on this little setup here. You can see the key light to the left of the camera. That is providing most of the illumination or the key illumination in the scene. The fill light provides fill on the opposite side of the subject. The key light provides or creates some shadows, and so the fill light is used on the opposite side or from the opposite angle that the key light is on in order to fill in those shadows that are created by the key light. And then the backlight is one that is behind, sometimes directly behind, but more often sort of at an angle from behind, as here, that separates or helps to separate the subject from the background that they're against, with the key light and the fill light shining from the front of the subject or onto the front of the subject. That causes sometimes so much illumination on the front of the subject that the person sort of blends into the background a little bit. And so the backlight is used to create a little separation by putting a little bit of light onto their backside as well and separating them from the background. You can see the alternate label here for it is hair light. And the reason that it is called that sometimes is that sometimes the effect that it has is that on the back side of a person's head or on their hair from the back, it causes a little bit of glow or a little bit of illumination around the edges of their head on an actor's hair. One of the things that filmmakers do with light is to create certain moods or certain effects. Emotional mood in a movie is often created by manipulating the light in particular ways or creating particular lighting conditions that are conducive to that mood or that effect. This could be a scary mood in a horror movie. It could be a cheerful mood in a romantic movie or a comedy. It could be a foreboding mood in a drama or in any variety of different things. And so filmmakers use all of the characteristics of the photographic qualities and the lighting in a film to try and create these moods or effects. The film stock, the lenses that are used, whether the light is filtered or diffused, what the nature of the light sources are, and where those light sources are shining from. All of these things are utilized and manipulated by the filmmakers in order to achieve those moods or effects. And it is in this manipulation of light that is one of the areas in which the cinema achieves artistic and aesthetic excellence. The artistry of cinema is to a large extent created through the ways in which light is manipulated and the way that light is presented by filmmakers. One of the other things that the camera can do, and that is related to the camera and how the film image is filmed, is related to camera movement. Now, there are a great many times, maybe even the majority of times in a movie, in a shot, where the camera is not moving at all. The camera is stationary. But there are many, many different instances in just about every film that you watch where the camera is moving in one way or another. And so it's important for us in learning how to analyze films to understand what all the different kinds of camera movement are and how they're accomplished. The first type of camera movement is when the camera moves by the head of the tripod that it is sitting on moving. Cameras are typically mounted on a tripod, which you're probably familiar with tripods. They are three-legged stands that a camera is mounted onto the top of. They are used for still photography as well as for cinematography. And the tripod, the head of the tripod can move, it can rotate and move in a variety of ways. And those different ways create some forms of camera movement. If the head of the tripod is moving in a horizontal fashion or up and down, I'm sorry, if the head of the tripod is moving in a left and right fashion, going back and forth to the left and the right, that is described as a pan. Horizontal movement of the camera as it is moved or turned on the head of the tripod is referred to as a pan. Up and down movement of the camera, if the head of the tripod is moved so that the camera is either begins to point down towards the ground, or alternately begins to point up towards the sky or higher at a low angle. That vertical movement of the camera on the head of the tripod is called a tilt. So pans and tilts are sort of companions of one another as types of camera movement that are achieved through the movement of the camera on the head of the tripod. When a tripod is not used, and there are many instances when a tripod is not used with a camera and the camera is being held by the camera operator, that is called handheld camera. The camera operator is holding the camera, usually having it resting on their shoulder, because film cameras can be rather heavy instruments. So the camera is resting on their shoulder or sometimes just in their hands, and the camera operator, the person who is the camera operator, is walking around or otherwise moving, and that is how the camera movement is achieved. Oftentimes, or usually when it is just handheld, the image can be a little shaky because all of the little bumps and jostling that happens when we are just walking around is absorbed by the camera, and you can see that in the film image. And sometimes that effect is used artistically by the filmmakers to create kind of a jostling effect, or to create kind of a disturbing or a distressing effect, or an unsettling effect caused by the camera movement. There has been for a number of years an apparatus that camera operators can wear, developed in the 1970s, called a Steadicam. And what a Steadicam is that it is a harness with some counterweights that the camera operator wears and that the camera is mounted to, that allows the camera operator to walk around just as in normal handheld camera, but allows the elimination of all of that shakiness and all of that jostling in the film image. And so Steadicam shots are ones that are very fluid, in which the camera is able to move around easily and into a lot of different types of areas, but it does so very smoothly because the Steadicam rig allows or prevents the kind of shakiness that is normally the characteristic of handheld camera. There are examples of a Steadicam shot and the sort of thing it can do artistically in a movie in this week's film clips as well. Another category of camera movements is ones in which the camera and the tripod are mounted on yet another sort of piece of equipment to create tracking or crane shots. Tracking shot is one in which the camera apparatus is literally mounted on what are like railroad tracks. And that allows another sort of fluid camera movement, usually horizontal in nature, lateral, in which sometimes characters that are walking can be followed by the camera, or just camera movement can be achieved in a lateral fashion by rolling the camera along on a platform on these tracks. And then a crane shot is a type of moving camera shot that is achieved by having the camera and the tripod mounted on a little platform at the end of a crane that is then raised up or down through the air to create that sort of an effect of vertical movement. Tracking and crane shots are sort of, or you can think of them as extreme versions of pans or tilts. A tracking shot is a more elaborate version of a pan in that the mobility of the camera is much greater than that possible just by panning the camera on the head of the tripod. And a crane shot is one in which there's a much greater degree of mobility in terms of the vertical movement of the camera. In allowing the camera to go much higher and much lower than it would be able to just by using the head of the tripod. Finally, there's one last category of camera movement that is called the zoom. Everybody is probably familiar with the idea of a zoom shot or a camera zooming, where it starts out at one subject camera distance, such as a long shot, and then changes to a different subject camera distance, such as a medium shot or a close-up, by the camera zooming in on one particular part of the shot. Or it also works in reverse. An image can start on a closer shot, a close-up or a medium shot, and then zoom out to a wider shot, a medium shot or a long shot. Zooming, the use of a zoom lens on a camera, does not actually involve the camera itself moving. The only thing that is moving in a zoom shot, as far as the camera, is elements within the lens. It is a totally optical thing that simulates the motion of the camera. And zoom shots have very particular visual characteristics that create a unique sort of look in a zoom shot. Some of the things that are possible with camera movement from a stylistic standpoint are mobile framing and reframing. This is simply the idea that because a camera is able to move in a variety of different ways, that when the action is taking place in a scene of a movie, the frame can be moving as well. The frame does not have to remain stationary. There can be a mobility to the film frame that can allow it to follow the action that is taking place. Another variation of that, or related to that, is what is called reframing. That means that if the shot is composed in a particular way, with figures arranged in a particular way, a certain relationship of the camera to the background and the mise-en-scène that's being filmed, and then something changes in the action, new characters enter the frame, characters leave the frame, something happens, the image can be reframed sort of on the fly as the image is being filmed. You can see examples of mobile framing and reframing in one of the clips, one of the film clips in this week's lecture material as well. Another thing that often involves camera movement is what is called the long take. The long take. This is distinct from a long shot. It's very important to keep those two concepts separate because they are separate concepts. A long shot is, of course, one in which there's a large distance. The subject camera distance is great. The camera is a long ways away from the subject that it's shooting. Long take, on the other hand, is dealing not with distance but with duration. So the word long in long take referring to the length of time that a shot is running. Long takes can be sometimes 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes in length, all in one single shot. And there are a couple of examples of long takes in the film clips that you should watch in the lecture material this week as well. that show what sorts of things are possible when a filmmaker just lets the film run, lets the camera run, and does not cut away to a different shot, and action is allowed to unfold in one fashion or another without cutting to a different shot. Now, this doesn't have to involve camera movement. There can be long takes where the camera is completely stationary and the shot lasts for 2 or 3 or 4 minutes or however long. But usually, because of the length involved in long takes, the camera is oftentimes moving in a variety of different fashions, using a variety of different types of camera movement. And that's what you'll see in the examples of long takes that are in this week's film clips in the lecture material. Finally, what camera movement allows in terms of stylistic techniques or artistic techniques in film is editing within the shot. Now, we are going to be studying editing in detail next week, and you'll learn a lot about how film editing works. And so there are a lot of different things that go into film editing, alternating amongst different types of shots, creating continuity in the image and in the action that is taking place. And a lot of these things can be accomplished with camera movement by editing within the shot. In a zoom shot, for instance, you go from, say, a close-up to a medium shot or a medium long shot, and that is accomplished not by cutting from one shot to another, but it is accomplished within a single shot by using a type of camera movement. Same thing with, say, a character is in a room and is in one part of the room and gets up and walks across the room. That could be accomplished by cutting from one shot to another shot, and often is, but it could also be accomplished by using camera movement to follow that character through the room that they're moving from one side to the other of. And so editing within the shot is another concept, another stylistic technique that filmmakers can use when utilizing camera movement in the expressive content of a movie. The final concept related to cinematography that we're going to be discussing is depth of field. Depth of field is in reference to how much of the image that is seen in the film image, or how much of the depth of the film image is in focus. And there's a variety of different possibilities. Usually when we're talking about depth of field, we talk about deep focus versus shallow focus. Now, the field that is being discussed in depth of field is just everything that is in front of the camera. So when a camera is set up and has a particular amount of area that is visible in its viewfinder, that is called the field of the camera. And so depth of field refers to how much of that field or how far into that field are objects in focus. In shallow focus, there may be just the very foreground elements that are in focus or in sharp focus, and everything behind that foreground area is going to be out of focus or is going to be shallow. This is something that we see probably most of the time in close-ups. When we see a close-up of an actor, their face is in focus, their head is in focus, but usually any backdrop or background that is behind them is not in focus. One of the things that shallow focus can do is help to direct attention by the filmmaker. Now, obviously, in a close-up, the person's face that we're looking at in the close-up is the area that we are going to want to pay attention to. But even in other shots that are a little bit wider or more of a medium shot range than a close-up, shallow focus can be used to direct our attention as viewers and to make sure or the director making sure that we are paying attention to particular things in that image. Deep focus means that everything in the image, from the foreground through the various middle ground ranges, all the way into the far background of the image, is in focus. So everything that we can see in the image is in focus. And this allows for a little bit more ambiguity, because there's a number of different things, or there often is a number of different things in the film image that are in focus that we can look at and pay attention to. And so this too is used by filmmakers, by directors, to shape our interpretation of the image. There sometimes is a number of different things that we are able to pay attention to, and so that introduces some ambiguity into what the filmmaker is trying to portray in that particular image or in that particular shot. So depth of field is a filmmaking concept in part, related to how much of the field in front of the camera is in focus. And technically, there's a number of different things that filmmakers have to do with the lens, with the position of the camera, with the position of the objects in front of the camera, in terms of being able to ensure that exactly what they want to have in focus is in focus, and exactly what they don't want to have in focus, if there are some things they want to have not be in focus, are going to not be in focus. So depth of field is another powerful tool that filmmakers can use, along with camera movement and along with the manipulation of the photographic qualities of the film image, in order to present different things in their films.